Welcome everyone. Sabah al-Khair from the West Coast on this very auspicious weekend with the news that has just dropped politically. I just want to say, first of all, my name is Malek Najjar. I'm based out of Eugene, Oregon with the University of Oregon, and we are on the Kalapuya, the traditional home of the Kalapuya people here in Eugene. And this presentation is brought to you by Network 1017, which was formed in Seattle, Washington in 2015 as a 501c3 nonprofit organization by a diverse group of American professionals with a vision to promote higher education, leadership development, career success, and nationwide and international professional networks. They understand the importance of a strong network and made it their mission to provide opportunities to build professional networks and to cultivate success within our community. And in that vein, I was asked by the wonderful Sally Hassan and Joe Hazel to moderate this panel about nonprofits and NGOs and charitable organizations that are doing some amazing work. And we have 4 of our luminaries in our community who are doing that work. You know, so often we talk about change in the world. We talk about how we want to institute change, how we wish we could institute change, but these people are actually making change happen on the ground. And so I just want to say before we begin how much I respect all of your efforts. I know how difficult it is to run a 501c3 myself because I started a theater company in my youth that I ran for 5 years that was a 501c3, and that very small venture was exhausting. So I totally understand all of the difficult work that goes into such a thing. I'd like to first start off with some brief introductions. We have with us today Adam Ballout, Esquire from Seattle, Washington. Adam is an attorney and a founding partner of the ABC Law Group, a family law practice that specializes in representing families involved in child protective services and Department of Social and Health Service hearings. He currently serves as president of the board of directors for the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Rasha Adib from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Rasha is the founder of Nadia's Hope Foundation, a nonprofit focused on bringing awareness and resources to those suffering from domestic violence. Since its inception, Nadia's Hope has had a strong media presence and has been able to spread awareness on domestic violence issues and provide financial aid to those suffering from this abuse. Carolina Masri from Cleveland, Ohio, is the executive director of MedWish International, a nonprofit that is aimed towards repurposing discarded medical supplies and equipment to provide humanitarian aid to people in need all over the world. Carolina was instrumental in the disaster relief efforts to aid those affected by the August 4th blast in Beirut. And last but not least, Zaina Saab from Beirut, Lebanon. Zaina is the founder of the Nawaya Network, a nonprofit organization based in Beirut, whose mission is to discover the hidden potential in disadvantaged youth and connect them to resources that help them develop their skills. Since 2016, Nawaya has supported nearly 5,000 youth across Lebanon. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We really are grateful. And what I'd like to begin with is if you could each take us through what you believe your organization does outside of this brief introduction I've given, and also perhaps the genesis of your organization. So Adam, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, thank you so much, Malek, and also thank you to Sally and Joe and all the other panelists. In terms of my involvement, I'm part of the first clinic. It's the Family Intervention Response to Stop Trauma. And our organization, the trauma is the unnecessary removal of a baby and a child at the hospital. And so over the last year, our clinic works to provide legal representation to mothers and then connect them to legal services to prevent CPS from removing their baby. In the jurisdiction that I'm in, an average of between 10 and 15 babies are removed from their mothers every month at the hospital. And so that has a lot of detrimental effect on not just how a baby develops. If you think and understand brain development for babies, they have about 1 million synapses that are connected in their brain a day. And so if you're removing a baby from their mother for 3 days or 2 months or a month, or ultimately having that child just be adopted by someone else, we're creating people and sending them out into this world with tremendous amounts of trauma. And so the goal of the clinic is to prevent that, to give moms legal advice. As it stands now, you get an attorney 3 days after your baby's been removed from you in our state. And so our clinic works at the hospital. It's a medical legal partnership to educate moms about what CPS involvement looks like, and then while they're pregnant, to figure out what their resources are, connect them to housing, connect them to treatment, so that we can fix some of these issues prior to their baby arriving, and then keep mom and baby together. The second organization is the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And my work with domestic violence began in 2012 when another attorney that I was working against actually on a case, our case wrapped and we ended up becoming good friends, and she invited me to take her board position on this agency. It was a local agency, and we worked to change policy regarding domestic violence, to influence political policy and political change, and then also to provide direct services to clients through our shelter. And yeah, that's me.
Wow. Adam, thank you so much. I hope that later in our discussion we can talk about child separation as a larger issue outside of the specific work you're doing there, but also what's happening nationally.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Please, could you please start us off, Rasha, about what you're doing in Canada?
Yeah, thank you again, everybody, for organizing this. And Adam, thank you for what you do. I think it's amazing work. And Nadia's Hope Foundation was founded in 2018. We started off as a nonprofit organization. So our goal is to raise awareness around domestic violence and abuse by partnering with local shelters, and to host presentations to talk about red flags, what are healthy relationships. And we've also partnered with our local, so Canada, we have RCMP, which are in towns, and then the Calgary Police Service, which is in my city. We've partnered with both of them in order to host presentations in high schools. So last year we went to 5 high schools in a town called Airdrie. We partnered with the RCMP and they did the presentations with us so that we can talk to the youth about what are healthy relationships, what are the red flags of domestic violence, because unfortunately in high schools, these things are not taught and you don't know who to turn to when it comes to how, what are relationships like and what are things that are not okay in a relationship. So to give these presentations, we're hoping to equip them with enough information to take that later into their life. And we're officially a registered charity as of March of 2020. So that was a really, really awesome and big step for our organization. And our goal is to provide financial relief for people in Calgary who have lost somebody to domestic violence and abuse, because just from personal experience and what my family went through, funerals and burials are very, very, very expensive. So if we can provide some type of financial relief, we would love to do that. And to people who don't know my family or my family story, in 2018, unfortunately, we lost my younger sister Nadia to domestic violence here in Calgary. And so it was very shocking to both the city and also our Druze community. But the Druze community came in with full and amazing support. And luckily, because of that, we were able to just have a lot of emotional support. Financial support was amazing too. And we're super thankful for everybody that did help out. So our goal really is to just keep Nadia's story going, to honor her in any type of way, which is why we started this organization.
And we really send our condolences to your family. And it's just amazing that you were able to bring something positive out of something so horrifically tragic. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words.
Carolina, if you could please tell us more about your organization and your work.
Thank you so much, and so humbled to be part of this group of incredible individuals that are really making a difference all over. So a little bit about my background with the organization. I joined MedWish back in 2015 when I relocated here to Cleveland. I do oversee the different heads of departments, including operations, humanitarian aid programs, development, and volunteers. We're small. We have our number of staff varies between 10 and 12, and we have a board of about 16 individuals. We are based in Cleveland, and our mission is to provide humanitarian aid to individuals in need all over the world. So our mission is dual. We save the environment, but at the same time, we are touching and we're impacting lives all over the world. And since our inception in 1993, 27 years ago, we've supported underserved communities in more than 114 countries. We are an accredited member of the Medical Surplus Alliance, which is a program of the Task Force for Global Healthcare, and we recently received U.S. congressional recognition. We do not only send supplies, but we send volunteers to different remote villages all over the world. We have more than 9,200 volunteer check-ins every year that come to our building and help us sort and pack all the supplies that we receive from generous donors. And it's a huge oil machine that we keep going. Before this, I used to work for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Right. Started by another prominent Lebanese, Danny Thomas, absolutely, who was a performer, and I wrote about him in my book. So he was somebody who really was incredible on many levels. Zana, coming to us from, of course, our beautiful homeland of Lebanon. Can you please tell us about what you're doing there?
Sure, thank you for having me, and it's so inspiring already to hear about everyone's remarkable stories and initiatives. I'm Lebanese American. I moved to Lebanon in 2008 to start a nonprofit called Nawaya Network, and the intention behind it was to identify underprivileged youth who have incredible potential, who just don't have access to the right skills, to the right resources to develop their skills, and over the years evolved into focusing more on, so in the beginning it was focused on talent development, but after the influx of Syrian refugees and after poverty started to rise in Lebanon and more youth unemployment, started realizing that we need to focus more on livelihoods, helping youth really focus on skills that'll help them generate income. And there were a few options, either helping them start their own small businesses. So we started a program in partnership with UNICEF in 2016. I started the NGO in 2012. So in 2016, built an entrepreneurship program to help Lebanese and refugee youth start small micro enterprises. And these micro enterprises are often home-based, small scale, but really helping them generate income to help them get by. Another program that we launched is called SE Factory, which is a coding bootcamp. We identify low-income youth across the country who are interested in web development. Maybe they're graduating from universities, but the quality of education is not so good, but the demand for their skills is high. We know around the world, not just in Lebanon, there's a high demand for web developers. So we identified this opportunity and thought, you know, let's create a coding bootcamp for low-income youth. They enter our program. It's 14 weeks long. They build their tech skills, their soft skills. We connect them to employers looking to hire, and we get them jobs. So far, 90% of our graduates are finding jobs in Lebanon and also through remote work, which is also important because of the economic crisis now that Lebanon's going through. Maybe less companies are hiring here, but because of remote work, we're able to get partners around the world to hire and to hire our youth and keep them in Lebanon. And this way we reverse the brain drain and keep our talent here. We're also now in the process of launching another program after the explosion that absolutely was devastating. I don't need to even tell you all. We really felt like we really needed to respond to the needs of the community at a local level, at the neighborhood level. And so we created a paid apprenticeship program, recognizing that there are so many youth now from those areas that are unemployed, that are losing hope, that have nowhere to go, and they don't know what to do. So we created a program that will help them develop their employability and soft skills to prepare them actually for remote work. So it's not necessarily coding only, because that's clearly just for some people, but there's a huge universe of remote work jobs that we could prepare our youth for, whether it's social media, marketing, graphic design, copywriting, translating. So we're in the process of doing this, and it's going to expand beyond the neighborhoods that were affected by the explosion, but also hopefully become nationwide. So that's what we're up to.
Thank you. Now, one of the things that Network 1017 wanted me to ask was, can you give us a little perspective on the difference between an NGO and a charity and the different works that go on with nonprofits? Please, anyone who'd like to jump in and maybe help us with that distinction.
I'll be happy to jump in real quick. So pretty much the scope of work is what varies. I mean, they're pretty much the same, but if you look at a nonprofit, many times are affiliated with perhaps churches or clubs, or represent small-scale projects, or maybe alumni associations, things like that. But when you think about an NGO, which is a non-governmental organization, what they do is they have a broader and a more internationally driven footprint, right? If you Google that, that's what you will find. And the work is a little bit more, as I said, internationally expanded.
Excellent, excellent. What about charities? What was the distinction between an NGO and a charity, for instance?
So charity is really part of the status that you gain, especially when you become a tax exempt for per se organization, or when you gain that nonprofit status. You will find a lot of charities. They're trying to do the good work. They're trying to help people. They struggle many times to obtain that status, but once they obtain it, they become official nonprofit organizations. They're not working for a profit.
Right. Now, let me say that Network 1017 is going to be accepting donations for our wonderful NGOs and charities that are represented here. So please visit the Network 1017 site, and if you can donate, please do. Can you talk a bit about donations? Adam, how do donations work? How much of donations go into what you do, and how necessary is that idea of the public funding of a charity?
So I'll talk in two parts. First, on the domestic violence front, personal donations are huge. They make up anywhere from 20 to 30% of a proposed budget annually. There are grants that come in from federal entities, state entities, but as we all know, given the political climate and the shift in which administration takes over, something which used to be secure, like domestic violence funding, was rapidly kind of placed in jeopardy. And so the shift to just having personal donations was having a huge impact. And so what we've seen since essentially this last administration, one-term administration, that there was a huge increase in personal giving. And so what that did was, if you have a nonprofit and there is some political landscape that is shifting, your amount of personal gifts and donations do two things. They sustain your organization, but then they also create a network of individuals who have already financially given to you, which you can tap into for either help with organizing in the future, volunteering in the future, or potentially giving again.
Wonderful. Rasha, what's the situation in Canada? Is it similar? Do you have more governmental funding? We have this notion in our minds in America that, in the United States, I should say, that Canadians have more governmental funding than we do. Is that true?
So before COVID, for sure, things have quite shifted in regards to who is eligible for government funding. So a lot of the grants, for example, that I applied to last year were canceled and they were redirected to COVID-19 relief. So unfortunately, because we are a very, very small charity, we haven't really felt the impact of just like financially, because we don't have staff yet. It's all volunteer based right now. But beforehand, there's definitely really big grants, but you do have to have history with your organization. So funding is actually quite difficult at the moment, and was even before COVID. So we're relying a lot on personal donations, which is what has helped us so far. In the beginning, everything, so this is the tricky part with nonprofits, is in the beginning, everything is out of pocket. Everything is what you invest, and unfortunately, you do have to spend personally, like financially, into the organization, even when you do become a charity, because again, funding is quite tight. And what happened was you have to have a couple of years of history with the organization for you to even be recognized as like an organization that's making change or doing something. And that's also why it's important to get that charity status, because first of all, you allow people will donate more to your organization. Unfortunately, because there is a benefit to it, you will get a tax receipt. So that's a really big, good step to your organization, is getting that charity status. But in Canada, it takes a really long time. I think I looked up how it is in the United States, and you can automatically apply, I think, right away from the get-go as a charitable organization.
And usually you're put under an umbrella 501c3 until you get your own here sometimes.
I haven't read too much into it. I think it's a little, yeah. Whereas in like the way that I had to apply for it, you have to apply as a nonprofit in your own province first. And then you apply as a status, like a charitable status with the government of Canada. And it took about a year, honestly, to get this status. Yeah. And from what I've heard is sometimes it can range from 1 to 5 to 10 years for some organizations to get that charity status, because they don't want to make it really easy, because they just, unfortunately, like, it's susceptible to fraud and for people to use these organizations in a bad way. So I understand the process, but it is is quite time consuming and energy consuming, but we're glad that we have the charity status. It's quite an advantage to us. And right now, again, funding is mostly just through donations, which have been amazing so far. And I think you were talking about people feeling really generous right now. So for sure, at first it was hard to ask for donations because, you know, you think of people losing their jobs, but I think people are really in the giving mood because they see, unfortunately, just how much people are suffering. So luckily the donations have still been coming in, and all of our donations go directly to either like the presentations or to the financial relief for families who've lost somebody. Yeah.
Great. Zaina, how is it in Lebanon? Is it difficult to achieve a sort of charitable status there, or how does that work governmentally?
Depending on which Minister of Interior is the Minister of Interior, okay. It took us in 2011 about 6 months because we had Ziad Baroud, but we heard much later that we were lucky because another minister was taking forever. So luckily we did get something called Ilmu Khabar, which is the permit for the NGOs here. But on the question of if we get governmental support, we would not even want governmental support. So we do our own fundraising at the very beginning as well. Starting an NGO, as Rasha said, you know, it's very much out of pocket. You try to sustain it as you go. The more you gain credibility, the more that you create some kind of impact, the better, because that way you can get more beyond your own immediate circle of family and friends. Eventually, maybe strangers will start to know about your work and start to support it. So that was the journey that we took. And the first few years were actually quite difficult. We relied a lot on crowdfunding, and we're so grateful for that because that really kept us going. Some corporate support as well, corporate sponsorships here and there, because we were a very small organization. It was myself and I had 2 people full-time helping to support the organization. That kept us going on a minimal budget for the first few years. But then in the transition, when, you know, the refugee crisis started pouring into Lebanon and the poverty rate started going up and, you know, issues with unemployment, we started realizing we can't just stay on such a small scale. We really do need to expand and go bigger and change our programming to an extent that we're able to actually scale. And so at that point, we started thinking much bigger and started thinking of how can we actually get grants, major grants, more than, you know, $10,000 a year from a foundation, but how can we get the bigger amounts? And we were very lucky to strike an incredible partnership with UNICEF in 2016, which is ongoing till this day, but also a number of other foundations, Global Fund for Children, and a number of others from the Gulf and the UK and whatnot. So I think with time, the more work we do and the more impact we show, the funding will hopefully arrive in one way. And I also want to mention that crowdfunding is also ongoing as we speak, but the crowdfunding is really more specifically focused on supporting individual youth. For example, the paid apprenticeship program, the money raised goes specifically to support the youth in their time of unemployment, and the bigger grants go to support the operations, and they go to support, you know, the other less exciting, less personal expenses that people are understandably less excited to maybe support. And I can understand why crowdfunding would be more effective when people feel that it's actually going really to specifically support the lives of people who actually need it in different ways. Not to say, however, that crowdfunding also shouldn't be used on this other stuff, because this is what helps keep the organization going. So if the organization is at its early stages, I would also encourage that kind of support, because this work is absolutely essential behind the scenes as well.
Absolutely. Can you all talk to us a little bit about your boards of directors? Because another way that one can contribute to an NGO or nonprofit or charity is by serving on a board and being an active member of the board. And then, of course, other professionals can help with pro bono law work, for instance, et cetera. So would you like to take us through the journey of a board of directors? What is that, and how do you recruit a board that can support your work? Carolina, can you start us off with that?
Sure, happy to. Well, typically, a nonprofit has has to have a board that contains at least 3 important officers: the president, the secretary, and the treasurer, and their roles and the description of what they need to do should be written in their bylaws, or what we know as code of regulations in some other states. What I've seen, and I totally recommend nonprofits do as they build their boards, is that they try to expand on the areas of expertise where they're going to need help. Of course, we are volunteer-based. We're not paying these board members, so we need to take advantage of the opportunity to bring these gems to come and work with us. I strongly support forming committees, for example, an executive board that can help you make some important decisions instead of calling for a meeting every time you have a small issue to address. You have some boards that have 40 or 50 or 60 board members. So how hard would it be to bring all these people together? So having an executive committee or an executive board is extremely important. A governance board that will allow you to hire or fire your president or your executive director when needed, will allow you to interview new board members. And most importantly, to have active and ad hoc committees, right? You have your finance committee, which is crucial and extremely important, your governance committee, and depending on what your mission looks like, you start building committees as you go. We do have committees, for example, for operations. We do have committees that are helping us with medical brigades, things like that. And it really, I mean, it doesn't need to be members of your board. It has to be, it could be just people from the community who want to serve in that capacity. So that's a little bit of the background that we have at MedWish and that I feel works for many nonprofits.
What about you, Adam? How about First Clinic's boards? How does that work, the board of directors?
So another version of a board of directors is an advisory board as well. And so that's not as formal as a board of directors. They don't meet and keep minutes. You know, I came onto the domestic violence board. It was already established. I think keeping in mind when you're establishing a new board that you might not be able to assemble 12 people all at once. So getting maybe a mentor and somebody in the field. So keep it relatively short. I think 3 to 4 people who can serve as an advisory board to let you know what you don't know and what hurdles are up ahead. The benefits of having a board. There's also dangers too. We've seen a board of directors shift organizations in different directions. We've seen a board of directors debilitate an organization essentially with their ego by not knowing when to leave and not having a transition plan for other people to come in and sustain an organization. So boards can come in sort of all shapes and sizes. If you are looking at either forming a board or serving on a board, I'd highly recommend a book by The Economist. That's just a guide. It's called The Guide to a Board of Directors. And it's a fantastic breakdown of what the roles are and a lot of what the terminology is. And so I'd highly recommend on a board, but definitely make sure it's of something you're passionate about. That would be my first piece of advice on that. Yeah.
Sure. Rasha, what about you? I mean, your organization's story is so personal. How did you go about getting a board of directors or getting people to support your work?
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think people need to understand that when you're first starting like an organization, that you can have friends and family that are on your board of directors, and you can start off that way. So just maybe get some people that you trust on your board, as long as, like you're saying, Carolina, you have 3 people to start the nonprofit, then that's what you can go off of. And then you want to definitely expand into people who you know will be an asset to your organization. So for example, now we have an RCMP officer on our board of directors, especially with somebody who works specifically with domestic violence. And we also have somebody who's like she's a social worker, or she's in school to become a social worker. And we have a business owner as well. So we want to be very versatile in who we have in our board of directors, because yes, it's really nice to have friends and family, but you need somebody who's kind of like a third party, an outsider who can criticize you, because you know, my friends and family, they're great, but they don't want to say or do anything that's going to hurt me, or that they don't want to go maybe against what I want to do. But I do need somebody who's going to put things into perspective of like, you know, in the beginning I had really, really big goals and like, I want to get this done in a year or 2. And then I had to really like sit down and be like, it's not possible. And I had to have people tell me like, Rasha, it takes time. You need to like, you need to be patient with it, because I wanted things right away. And that's unfortunately not how it works. So to have people who aren't maybe too close to you to come in, and so that you can have different perspectives, is really important, because you don't want it to just be your friends and family. And depending on, so when you apply for a charity status, if you do have a certain percentage of people that are your family members, your organization becomes a private charitable organization, so you do want to have more people who are not your close, or like somebody who's at more than arm's length on your board of directors, just so that you are not like a private organization. And so you definitely want maybe a friend or two, but just to limit that so that you're not biased when it comes to like the decisions that you're making. Yeah.
Sure. Zaina, speaking of diversity of board members, we talk about the diversity of professions on a board, but in Lebanon, are there difficulties of getting, say, different people from different parts of Lebanon, or different factions or sects of Lebanese society to join you in your work, because you're trying to reach the whole country, yes?
That's true. Actually, I mean, being in Beirut, and because, I mean, I don't necessarily think in the mindset of, what this person's sect is. It's just really focused on what is this person's area of expertise? What's their specialty? What's their profession? Are they going to be passionate about what we do? Are they going to be committed? And so I started the NGO in 2012, and I think the board came about maybe in 2014. It didn't come right away. I was really busy, forming it at the beginning. But I do think, obviously, a board is essential. And in terms of the diversity of it, I mean, I had the CEO of Dunkin' Donuts on the board. Her name's Christine Sfeir. I asked, and the way I met her was just randomly on an MTV reality TV show that I was on for the idea of Nawaya back in maybe like 2012, 2013. And I saw her there as a judge, and she smiled at me, and I felt like, oh, this is a very personable person. Maybe I could email her and ask if she'd like to be on my board. And I didn't know her, but we developed some kind of relationship, and then I felt confident enough after a short period of time to actually ask her to be on the board. And then similarly, someone from Ahmed East, I took a business course from Ahmed East here, and I asked the general manager if she'd be interested in being on the board. I asked someone who's an entrepreneur. I asked someone who knew a lot about social entrepreneurship. So really trying to think of the professions and the different areas of expertise that would add value to the mission and vision of the organization. And actually right now, because one of the programs under Nawaya, the coding bootcamp, has become its own separate entity as a social enterprise, it needs its own board now. So I'm actually in the process of developing a board as we speak, hoping to have something put together by the end of the year, and really thinking of, okay, who's going to be really good with the tech aspect? Who's going to be really good with connecting us to different types of companies in the Gulf and around the world? Who's going to be really good with the financials and the business development and the numbers, the HR aspect, the networking aspect? So it's really broken down into that. And then also, I would say it would be great if there's already a relationship with that person, but it's not necessarily the only way. I think if you know someone who knows someone, that's also a good way to reach out to somebody by having a middle person vouch for you. And so if you develop that kind of relationship, maybe within the short period of time, you could actually pop the question just to make sure that that person actually is really interested in what you're going to do and actually wants to spend time helping you out.
And it really is a relationship, isn't it? I mean, you have to have somebody who believes in you and what you're doing and supports that. Can we talk about challenges? I mean, my goodness, the amount of difficulties our world is facing on any given day is absolutely overwhelming. But the work that you all do is particularly addressing the most challenging aspects of the things that are going on in our world, in our society. Can you talk to us about some of the major, like maybe one massive challenge you've had to face in your work with your organization that you had to overcome, and maybe how you went about doing that? Could you start us off, Rasha?
Yeah, for sure. honestly, like to pick one challenge is quite difficult because there's a lot of obstacles. Like
Sure.
I think you go in, like, especially when you're starting an NGO, you go in with a really big heart and you think that because you have such a good cause and you're so passionate that things will be given to you. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And that was a big reality check for me because I thought, okay, by 1 or 2 years, I'll get enough funding and I can be maybe a full-time employee within my organization. And I had to really step back and think, okay, let's think about all these huge, like the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter, for example. They've been around for 50 plus years and they're at the stage that they are right now because of the fact that they've been around for quite some time. And I had to put that into perspective and think, okay, you're not going to get to that point in the next 2-3 years. And that's okay. Like, it's not like a status of a failure. And that's kind of what took a really long time, is that anytime I got rejected for anything like grants or the funding or any type of like connections, I felt it, I took it very personally as if I did something that was wrong. And I had to really think about the fact that no, like there is a lot of NGOs out there. There's a lot of charitable organizations. It might not be you this time, next time it might. So what you have to do is, even though it is a very personal cause because of personal experience, and every time that I present, anytime I talk about it, anytime I reach out, it's still like a piece of my heart is always chipped away because of it. So that's also a really big struggle, is that my heart is in it all the time. But I have to understand that, again, it's not anything about me that I'm doing wrong. It's just that it's going to take some time, and it's okay. That's a good thing. And as long as like one accomplishment, even like in a year or two, is something to be very proud of. And also to always look back at the accomplishments you've made. It's so easy to be like, I didn't get this funding, I didn't get that, I didn't get this. But to look back and think, wow, this is what I've done so far, is something you have to always, it's good to also write down what you've accomplished, so that anytime you're feeling down about yourself, you go to this list and you think, oh my goodness, like I actually did a lot. I should be very proud of this. So that's my advice to anybody who's starting or is in an NGO right now.
Yeah. What about you, Adam? I mean, my goodness, with the statistics you gave us just in your introduction about, 10 to 15 babies removed from their mothers on a monthly basis. I mean, the numbers just in that one instance is overwhelming. What kind of challenges do you face, and how do you deal with them all?
I agree with what Russia said about writing down successes, and it's incredibly important to look back at that, because I think when challenges come, they tend to be on a parallel track with personal challenges as well. So I think it's important to keep in mind as you're going forward that there's a personal sort of challenge that you may have some internal reflection about whether you're qualified enough to do it or whether you should be the one to do this. And then on the other side was the obstruction that occurred. For our clinic, the CPS state social health services actively in the beginning of our clinic about 1.5 years ago worked to undermine it. So they would ask hospital social workers not to send women to our clinic. So the frustration of that and the anger of that repurposed us to do better. And so I think some of those obstructions and challenges are fuel just and be.
Oh, I think we lost Adam. Okay, hopefully we'll get him back shortly. But all right, let's go ahead and talk about other challenges that Carolina and Zana, specifically, if we can talk about what happened in Beirut. Oh, are you back, Adam?
Yeah, sorry, I got a call. It's about the election, and then when I declined it, it takes you off.
So, sorry, continue, Adam.
Yeah, so a lot of those personal challenges, I think you use them as fuel to then push forward and be like, no. My mission is not going to be undercut by somebody who's sabotaging me. No. That's not how this is happening. And so that dedicates you to come in on the weekend and to work extra to make sure. So yes, obstruction happens. I've always taken it as sort of a personal fuel to, push through it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, really, the thing that I found working with nonprofits is there's a passion there that is undeniable. And that passion usually overcomes so many of the doubters and the haters and all those people out there that are trying to shut things down. It's amazing. But getting back to that question, Zena and Carolina, about Beirut, I mean, that explosion was so unbelievably traumatizing for Lebanon. How do you deal with something on that magnitude? I just, you know, those of us in the diaspora are just, we're shell-shocked being here. I can't imagine what it means to you there and what you've had to deal with since.
Yeah, honestly, every time I think about it, it's just an absolute nightmare. And obviously unforgivable and unforgettable. How we deal with it, in the past year alone in Lebanon, you know, the revolution happened, which was a good thing, but it paralyzed the country and our work. Beyond that, the COVID crisis, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And then the explosion. And so before the explosion, we were dealing with crisis after crisis and trying to think, how do we adapt? How do we keep moving on in a new environment? How do we respond? How do we make sure that what we're doing is, you know, not insensitive? Like, you can't just stay on the same track when so much is imploding around you. You have to respond. Maybe you have to pause. Maybe you have to recreate. You need to check in with your people, your community, your staff. Is everyone okay? Oh, we're gonna go down, you know, and protest. Okay, well, the program's on pause. The country is on a different page. And so with the explosion as well, I didn't work for 2 weeks. And on the first management call I had, I was in tears. And I can break down right now as well. It's so raw what happened. And, but we have to move on. And on a personal level, if I didn't have Nawaya in my work, I think I would have ended up in the ER with IV, because I drove myself just psychologically and emotionally. I ran myself down. But luckily I have a job, and the job is related to social change and social impact and supporting people who need support. And so that was enough to help me get up and keep going in a moment of monumental crisis and devastation. And we needed to respond to the needs of the community. We couldn't just continue the coding bootcamp as if nothing happened. We couldn't just continue the entrepreneurship program as if nothing happened. Yes, those youth maybe were less affected by the explosion because we're working with youth across the country, but so the program needs to continue for them. But what else can we do to make it clear that we are not neglecting or forgetting the catastrophe that happened in the heart of Beirut? And so we were very much encouraged and inspired to actually do something, and seeing so many people and initiatives come together the next day, you know, finding a purpose, finding something to do to clean up and help the city back on its feet, was absolutely inspiring. And so that also gave us the strength and the motivation to also find something to do to help make a difference, which is why we started this third program.
And Carolina, I imagine trying to deal with other governments and their particular structures, their mechanisms, and sometimes corruption can be extremely difficult as well, isn't it?
It is. And as I think about this question, I'm imagining the role of the different NGOs here in the US and also in Lebanon. And the reality is that they're all trying to fulfill their mission. It doesn't matter where they are. But you said it, laws are different in every country, not only Lebanon. And we have to acknowledge that. And let's be honest, corruption levels are also different in every country. So what I can tell you as far as Madwish is that we're not here necessarily to change or criticize the policies of countries we serve. We're here to provide the help that is needed, and we work around it, and that can be very challenging. In this particular case, it really touched my heart, evidently, because it was Lebanon. We do respond to disasters all over the world, but this time it hit home, and it was just, I felt helpless, and I was trying to push my team to work even harder. And you could have seen the excitement every time we closed a container and we saw the flags, and just understanding the need and understanding how many people were able to help. Again, you do it every day, you do it for many countries, but when it hits home, the reality is that all the cables start, you know, going into different directions, and your emotions play an important role. As far as our response, I can tell you, we, for example, we follow US laws, and not only because we're registered here, but because of the different accreditations we have. And it doesn't seem that what NGOs are doing in Lebanon is different. It's just that we need to adjust to what our accreditation looks like and what's needed from our end to fulfill the mission. As far as Lebanon, something that I mentioned to you when we spoke, Michael, I feel that there are some incredible NGOs, and on a very, very personal opinion, I feel that we refuse to support a lot of them because we were just afraid of, there was a lot of mistrust, and we just didn't want to donate to this one, but we want to donate to that other one. But I feel that there were so many incredible NGOs doing this work even before the explosion. And then when the time came, I felt that we failed them. We should have supported them even more. Again, this is a very personal opinion. I don't want to create any type of controversy, but I strongly believe that they have existed for years. This is the mission they fulfill. We should support them.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of you have mentioned this on some level, but COVID-19 situation has really made all of our lives very different and difficult in different ways. But I imagine for your work specifically, it's been an extra burden in many ways. I mean, Rasha, how do you conduct your outreach now in this time? Is it all virtual? And how do you feel the message is getting across the way it used to when it was in person?
So COVID-19 it wasn't just like a physical toll and change that it took on people. It was quite mentally draining as well. And because yes, everything was in person for presentations and events and things like that, it definitely felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel, and like, how are we going to do any of these presentations? So it was a few months before things started to pick back up again, because the school year was ending, and that was a really important part of our project, is to go into the schools and do these presentations. So we did take a little bit of a break, but now we're going to start doing virtual presentations with the RCMP and at the schools. We're going to try, because our schools are open right now, but there's just social distancing and precautions that are taken. So we might try to go to the schools, but we do have the alternative of doing virtual presentations, which is really great. We've been pushing a little bit on doing online fundraising and things like that. So I think it's also, this is where your board of directors come in and they're really important, so that you can come up with ideas on how to do these fun virtual events where people are able to donate. But the trouble is that it is a lot of time, and it's not guaranteed that every single time you're going to get those donations. It might just be a one time where you're doing this event on your own time and it's free. And then there's other times where you are going to get an influx of donations. And so it's really, there's a few ways to kind of put it out there to have people donate to your organization. So I'm not sure if the US has the same types of websites, but we have this website called Canada Helps. And you can set up either monthly donations or one-time donations. So it can be something that can be quite encouraging, and just to say, hey, like, you can sign up for like a $5 monthly donation, and you get a charitable tax receipt towards the end. So just to maybe highlight something like that to anybody who's wanting to support you. So you say, hey, maybe for $5 a month, that's one Starbucks coffee, and maybe you can have that go towards a charity. And so just doing things like that instead. So it is definitely very tricky, and it's very time consuming, because also with online events, it's so hard it's so easy to forget things. Like, I'm guilty of that too, where I'm just saying, I'm going to attend this event, and then the next day I just think, oh my goodness, I forgot about it. So that's also the tricky part, is that with these events, sometimes it can be no shows. But it's hard to keep your head held high. It's very trying times right now. And what we thought at first was going to be, 3-6 months, is turning into maybe the next few years. So you have to redirect everything, honestly. And that's the difficult part, is you had this, I had this plan. We were planning to go to Calgary high schools. We were planning on doing fundraisers, an in-person event. We were going to do our first fundraiser, and everything was put on pause. So now you just have to get creative. And I think that's the struggle, is you have to change the direction of your organization completely to accommodate for things that are more virtual, or maybe smaller events and gatherings. So that's been the challenging part, is you had everything planned out, and then all of a sudden it's like, you can't do this anymore. So how do you change things and adapt to, honestly, this just new world that we're in right now?
Yeah, great question. Great question.
Yeah.
Adam, a similar question came up about COVID. Can you ask Adam if his cases have increased due to COVID, as statistics show that there has been an increase in domestic violence cases during this time?
Not just an increase, but also it's a combination of isolation and an inability to access services. So, COVID has been horrible for on the issue of domestic violence. Our shelter has shut down, and so we don't have an in-person shelter to put people in. We use flex funding, which is essentially funding that you can spend and then allocate how you are using it after. But we've been putting people up in hotels and using hotel vouchers to keep families safe. Our shelter was a confidential facility. It used to be a former armory from the military, and so it's a secure location. We can't put families in it anymore, and so we've had to reshift our entire direct services model. And then in terms of fundraising, our in-person events also were several thousand people. We had a 5K, a race inside Safeco Field. It was our normal fundraising. This year we shifted it to a virtual 5K. People essentially just ran in their communities and then uploaded, their maps, and then we sent medals to them. So it does require a little bit of creativity to think, outside the box about how we're doing funding, but also domestic violence areas have been targeted as well for their support of Black Lives Matter. There's a Wisconsin domestic violence agency that put up a Black Lives Matter flag, and they lost all of their county funding. It was $25,000. But then once word of that got out on the internet, they raised within 2 days $100,000. And so they more than made up for the loss. And so while there's some challenges and there's some attacks, I think there's also some opportunities to figure out where some allies you may come out of the woodwork to help. The average donation for the Wisconsin domestic violence shelter was about $5, and then they raised, over 100,000.
Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing. What about MedWish and the COVID situation, Carolina, as far as is there a difference now in what is required, what people are asking for? I mean, we hear about respirators and other things. Can you tell us a little bit more about the medical side of that?
Yeah, well, the need has changed, evidently. Most of the requests are right now COVID related. And when it comes to us as an organization, we had to experience a lot of challenges from adjusting to a new strategy, because even if you have a strategic plan, this was the time to tweak it, to change it, to adjust it, just because we're facing something so unexpected. The biggest challenge also is to remain relevant. And at the same time, when you are considered a charity that's doing an essential business per se, because we kept sorting, we kept looking for medical supplies to continue to help, especially our local communities, we had to understand and accept that everyone's emotional health, especially staff members and volunteers, has been affected. Some of us do accept the situation, adjust and work around it. Some of us truly struggle, and we need some time to adjust to the new reality. People were living the uncertainty of not knowing what was going to happen with the organization. We know of nonprofits that have closed their doors, they had to let people go and things like that. I think that COVID has brought us closer as an organization, thankfully. We have remained relevant. We have helped not only our local communities, but we have also responded to many disasters around the world in the middle of a pandemic. But going back to the question regarding supplies, yes, the needs have adjusted, and something that was really mind-boggling was to see the big healthcare institutions right here in Cleveland asking us for help during the pandemic. I mean, these are the same organizations and companies that have been donating to us for 20 plus years, and now they're asking us for ventilators, masks, gloves, you name it. So it was challenging, but right now I think things are starting to go a little bit back to normal because people are adjusting to this new reality. But that need, multiply it by 1,000 when you look into Lebanon or you look into other countries.
Yeah. And Zena, you referred to this earlier about the overwhelming challenges you've faced in Lebanon, but especially with COVID and the crippling situation with the blast destroying hospitals. I mean, entire hospitals. I mean, how do youth deal with this? I mean, how are they coping with? I mean, we talk about COVID uncertainty. Now let's talk about a complete political and structural uncertainty with everything going on. And we keep hearing about possible bailouts, not bailouts, and governmental, difficulties. How are youth dealing with this?
How are youth dealing with
youth
this?
and by extension, your organization helping them. Yeah.
It's actually a very difficult time, needless to say. We've helped launch around 800 small enterprises since 2016. A lot of them have been, had a lot of promising opportunities. We always check back with them. And this year, for those that, maybe were doing well a year ago or right before the economic and financial crisis, a lot of them are just, just sitting, and some of them shut down. Some of them are waiting. Some of them are demoralized. They're depressed. They don't know what to do. So when you think of what we do in terms of entrepreneurship, how do you keep a population of youth motivated to think, okay, yes, I can start a small business in this atmosphere? Who's going to buy my service? Who's going to buy my product? And so that urges us to think, to push them to be even more creative and more innovative. Like, what is it that you are passionate about? What do you want to do? Okay, what does the community need? How can you merge these together to make sure that what they invest in on a personal level would actually lead to results? So that's the challenge of our program. But despite all of that, we have some beautiful projects being launched and beautiful enterprises being launched despite the challenges. I can't say it's easy, and I can't say that all the youth are launching successful businesses, because even the most successful businesses in this country are shutting down. Yeah. But there is still a path. In terms of the employment programs that we're running, there's actually an opportunity. And I mentioned the coding bootcamp. So before COVID and before the economic collapse of the country, we had a large number of our graduates getting jobs in the country. But as a result of the economic crisis, we started thinking, how can we get them jobs? And then COVID happened, and there was even more of a need. But then during COVID, borders were shut down and airports were shut down, so it was harder for people to travel. And so you have this population of youth who are kind of stuck in this country, but there's an opportunity there. Because of remote work, there's a huge opportunity. So we started really focusing on finding company partners are outside Lebanon who are willing to hire our graduates. And now 45% of our graduates are working for companies based abroad, whether it's Dubai or Canada or France or the UK or Sweden. So this is what we're really investing in. And COVID made it even more possible, because before COVID, many people were used to in-person work. But COVID forced people to get used to this virtual work lifestyle. And so that was a beautiful opportunity, and more people are more willing to hire remotely now, and we're more affordable now because of the devaluation of the currency. So that's another twisted positive that happened. So we're adapting as much as we can.
Oh, wow. It's great. That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, adaptation is the way of survival, really, especially in these times. So I'm going to send out some questions to you from our wonderful audience who have been writing in. Amid Kasamani wrote, what options do we have to support these organizations? And so we talked about several of those being in-kind donations, financial donations, serving on boards. Are there other ways that people can support you?
Yes, you can help us spread the word. That is extremely important. I think that many times we have great data, we have great stories, but if we don't have the storytelling skills, it's challenging. So I feel that all of us in the nonprofit world, we are actually in the invitation business world, right? We're trying to invite people to come to the party, but we have to tell them the story, right? And we have to engage them. And that's how we are going to recruit more donors. That's how we're going to recruit our future board members and things like that. So I believe that sometimes we underestimate how much we can help these nonprofits by just spreading the word and creating awareness.
That's wonderful. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, actually, we have an online mentorship program, and super exciting because basically there are a couple of versions of it. One version is a town hall session. So say, for example, someone is an expert in customer relations or sales. So we would gather a large number of our youth, or a group of youth online who are running businesses that need to build their skill set in that area. So we find a professional who is able to offer like an hour or 2-hour online session about that topic. And so we have this for the entrepreneurship program, but also the apprenticeship program, it's more catered to employability and soft skills. So if anyone has, you know, strong skill set in public speaking or networking or personal branding online or CV writing or interview skills, whatever it is that will really help make someone stand out in an online interview for remote work, as well, we're always looking for mentors who can sign up. And yeah, we could even circulate a form for you if you're interested in signing up, and then just tell us what your specialization is, what your skill sets are. And whenever we know that a group of youth or one youth needs support in that area, we could connect you.
That's amazing. That's great. All right, another question. Hadila Reda asked, what can nonprofits do now to hold virtual fundraisers that are entertaining and attractive for people to attend? So have you had to spruce up your fundraisers? Have you had to do things to, you know, get attention? Because my goodness, there's so much noise, if you will, on the internet as far as all of this is concerned. So how do you make the pitch?
I can jump in real quick. I think that in our case, for example, 1/3 of our budget comes from our annual event. So that's huge, and it impacts your projections and your cash flow and you name it. So I think that the most important thing, because we're seeing so much donors fatigue, is to understand who your donors are and who your stakeholders are. I feel that we gotta be careful as to how much we ask from the same donors and the same people. We saw it around what happened with Lebanon, with the efforts around Lebanon. People got tired at some point because they were bombarded with so many requests. And you gotta try different things. I mean, there's no formula, I believe, in my opinion, that says this is the magic event. We, for example, if I may share a couple examples, we had a beautiful partnership with few artists from Broadway that were running these events, traveling all over the US, going to these different houses and helping us fundraise. So we converted that event into a virtual event. And it was great because people still joined, still enjoyed a beautiful performance by these talents while donating as well. But I think that something that's very important during these times, more than just an event, is a strong communication plan that can go aligned with your fundraising, right? It is important for the donor to understand what their support can do more than the message of please help us so we can survive. So that's just my very humble opinion.
Yeah. Anyone else want to talk about how you've reached out specifically to donors in this time?
I'll jump in for a bit.
Go ahead, Rasha, please.
Yeah, so it's really, like, I think with nonprofit organizations, it's really important just to talk about, like, to be very transparent on where donations are going. And you want to let them know that, you know, it's not going towards like a salary. It's not going towards, you know, like gas or anything. You want to state to people that a certain percentage of your donations are going to something that you think people are going to believe is really important. So for example, like for, you know, our relief fund is, we say 100% of our donations go towards these families who need some financial help. And even if it's not 100%, it's really, I think people will be really happy to see that your honesty. So let's say like 50% are going towards that. You have to be very, very transparent, because you, as a charitable organization and even as a nonprofit, you can do 1,000 amazing things, but if you do one thing that is that people see it as a little bit like sketch or something that's not okay, it will set back your organization and people will lose trust in you. So that's where it's really important to at least be honest, so that if anything were to come up, you would have proof, like I was honest about this and I stated this. And so reaching out and making sure that people know exactly where their funds are going is really, really important. And honestly, it's all through social media. That's how or like our organization has built a social media platform, is really just a lot of advertisement. So I know people are weird about that. They think like, how can you advertise a charity or a nonprofit? But it's actually key to getting the word out. So even if you have to pay for advertisements on like Facebook or Instagram, that's how we've been able to get the outreach that I have right now. Is, you know, random people would message and be like, hey, I saw like your Instagram story, or like I saw your Instagram post, it came up as an advertisement, and that's how I learned. And, you know, just random donations here and there. And even like on Snapchat, you can have your stories out. So that's where, don't be afraid afraid to spend money on advertisement, and don't be afraid to ask for for a donation, not maybe donation, sorry, but like for funding for advertisement, because that can be a really big part of your budget, but that will also get the word out the most, right? Especially because of the fact that everything is online and with being at home and things like that.
Absolutely. Do you ever run into the idea of like having, because all of you are dealing with people who are, struggling, quite frankly, in many ways. Have you had difficulties in how to craft that message and not fall into sort of the imagery that might, bring up images of victimization or something like that, but rather telling the more compelling stories in other ways?
So you definitely don't want to put out the message like Carolina and Zina were saying, that like you're desperate and you need funding because you need it for like salary or anything like that. You want to definitely have the personal aspect, and that's why NGOs and charities make it big, is when there's that personal story and one that people can relate to. And it's not going to relate to everybody. I think that's also what is like a reality check, is that not everybody wants to donate. Not everybody's like first concern is about domestic violence victims, because it's like some people think it's not going to impact them, and it might never impact them. But I think also, just to put in perspective also how much it can. So that's with domestic violence, is that people just assume that they fit the certain criteria or category, that it's people of low income. But that's not the case, is that it can impact everybody. And that's where you want to put it into perspective, that people who have that educational background, people who are wealthy, people who do come from good families, are affected by domestic violence, but also that if somebody does fit that stereotype of being a domestic violence victim, they still deserve help, and that their stories should not be brushed off just because you're like, well, I mean, this is a typical person that is supposed to happen to. That's where you want to just be, make it hit almost like close to home, and just also make it so apparent that it happens a lot. 1 in every 5 days, a woman in Canada is murdered by an intimate partner. In the United States, it's 3 women every single day. So to have that, to just put that out there, that it is a very, like, it's a very serious issue, and that it's not just Canada and the United States, it's a global issue, that it can impact everybody. So just to make sure that you are hitting close to home, but not to the point where you're making people feel bad about it, if that makes sense. Like, you don't want to say like, you need to donate because, like you're a bad person if you don't. That you don't want to ever put that type of messaging. You want those like legitimate and like personable donations.
Adam, at a time when the U.S. government itself started to trade in family separations, I mean, it is really beyond like anyone's comprehension that such a thing can occur, but yet it does, and our tax dollars, of course, are funding that kind of thing. How do you go about trying to speak about this? My gosh, it's unbelievable.
So the concept of family separation, it's important to remember, was deliberate. This is something that was done for the purposes of cruelty. Yeah. So you have the forced separation of mothers and their children who arrived at this country, and under international law are entitled to apply for relief and stay with their child and be in a safe environment. We've now learned that there's also been mass hysterectomies, forced hysterectomies of women in those detention centers. And so this is going to be a stain on our country's history for a long time until we fix it. I think internationally, certainly within the United States, and I'm not sure about Canada, but if you just say in any state, doesn't matter which one, if you walk up to a random citizen and you just said, what is your opinion of child protective services? They would all give you a negative opinion. It has a horrible reputation. But our system is so broken that it's also, in the opinion of the people inside the system, beyond repair. And so that's why our clinic is upstream in terms of an upstream approach to what the system is now. And I think the only way that we change something like that is to prevent it from occurring. We have to make every person aware that when you separate a mother and a baby, that is doing irreparable damage to a child, and that's not something that can be repaired overnight. The head of the hospital that we have a partnership with, when our clinic launched, she was one of the most adamant supporters of keeping moms and babies together. she said the meeting that she had just come with was a meeting of teenagers at the hospital who were all on suicide watch. And the only thing that they had in common across their races and genders was that they were all in foster care. Children who are in foster care believe they're unloved, believe that no one wants them. And that type of pain and cruelty is deliberately inflicted on one human being from another. So to educate people about that and to work to try to stop that is why we do this.
Absolutely. My goodness. Another question. What is a key element to sustaining your organization? How do you keep it going year after year, decade after decade? I mean, it's you know, it's a lot of work. So how do you do that, and how do you personally do that?
If I may,
Please.
I think that that's the biggest challenge, right? For all nonprofits, how do we sustain ourselves? How do we keep going? There are challenges as to how are we going to expand our programs? How are we going to expand our outreach? How are we, again, communicating our impact and things like that? I do believe that it all comes down to what that vision looks like and what that strategic plan looks like. As nonprofits or these type of organizations create their strategic plans, I believe that they should have a major focus on their aspirational goals when it comes to sustainability. In our case, I feel that the relationship that we have with grant makers and foundations are very important. We are fully transparent with them as far as the different programs that we have. And we try to create a relationship where they support us on multi-year basis, right? Because that's what they want to see. They want to see, well, we're going to support you right now, but how are you going to sustain this program? What the plan is? And then you work around that. You work with your donors as to how can we make this program last, right? How are you going to justify new salaries to create a new program and things like that. I also believe that many times we underestimate the impact of the general donation or the general operations. We're afraid to talk about the money that's needed to keep our lights and our doors open, right? And we talk about just specific programs and how you're going to help us make a difference. But some donors and some foundations have the capacity to understand that nonprofits need general funding just to pay for these salaries that sometimes we're afraid to talk about, or to pay for a building that allows us to fulfill our mission. So I believe that these relationships are extremely important. And there are so many foundations that are open to hearing what are the organizations doing and how can they help them. When they see long-term leadership, that's also crucial. Instead of a nonprofit that's constantly changing. I mean, they don't trust an organization that doesn't have a strong leadership. So little things, I believe, help you with the sustainability. I think about COVID, right? I mean, right now we're thinking about how are we going to go through this year, but have you thought about how are we going to enter the next year? Because this might continue for more than just a few months or a year. So thinking ahead is also extremely important.
Absolutely. What about you, Zana? I mean, with such an uncertain future in Lebanon at all times, how do you sustain your work?
What comes to mind, one big path is social entrepreneurship. So it's a big I feel like it's extremely valuable for NGOs to find ways to be financially sustainable. And if possible, if there could be a way for the NGO to identify certain revenue streams that could maybe help pay certain bills that others maybe aren't willing to pay for, help keep at least a program running up until new funding comes in. I know it's not easy because it's basically like you're starting a business, and that's actually a good thing. I think if an NGO can find a revenue model, that's a very good thing. But I do recognize that this is not possible for all NGOs. Those specific ones that are charity based, or specific programs that are working with, for example, our entrepreneurship program. How do we make money from that? One person could say that you could maybe get a cut from the income or the revenue that the enterprise is generating. We can't really do that because these are low income, vulnerable individuals. We don't want to take anything from them in that sense, especially because they're already making not so much from that enterprise. It's a small scale micro business. and it could also be seen as taking advantage of them or whatnot. So we need to think very carefully. Maybe a program like that is difficult. But on the flip side, the coding bootcamp, we are taking a cut from the graduates' new salary because they're finally employed. They're making money on a monthly basis, and we just take 1 month salary, and it can be, you know, divided over a period of 1.5 years. So it's as low as $50 a month out of a salary of maybe $1,300. We're also taking a fee from the companies that hire them. So we needed to think creatively to create revenue to keep it going. But I can't say that right now we're 100% financially sustainable, but that is a goal. And the more we can become financially sustainable, the better, because then you aren't subjected to, you know, sudden decrease in funding 1 year. You find ways to grow in that sense. So I would encourage that kind of mindset, that creative, innovative approach to nonprofits.
Sure. Here's a great question by our wonderful Sally Hassan, which is, where do you see your organization in 5 years? So Rasha, can you start us off?
Yeah, for sure. So where I see the organization in 5 years is that I'm hoping to implement these presentations in all Alberta high schools, so that it's part of a curriculum where every single year they will have just that one presentation where they talk about domestic violence and healthy relationships. Because even just going to the 5 high schools and having the youth come to us afterwards and ask us questions like, hey, is stalking, like, is that a bad thing? Like, is that not okay? Is that a red flag? And just to be so disheartened and think that the fact that they don't know that is actually like, is pretty concerning. And the fact that they don't have anybody to talk to. So what we do is we also bring in an organization called Victim Services. So they're specifically for domestic violence victims. And to have that incorporated in all of the high schools in Alberta is probably one of the biggest goals that I'm trying to achieve. And hopefully within Canada, maybe not 5 years, it's already hard enough because unfortunately in Canada, we have a lot of schools that are specifically Catholic schools, and they're a little bit harder to get into. And so that's kind of the biggest project that we have. But in the long run, I would love to have a shelter that's opened in Nadia's name, and just to have somewhere. Sorry. So that we can honor her and have something forever.
Absolutely. Well, if Terry Fox can cross Canada, I'm sure your organization will.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Adam, what about you? 5 years from now, what do you envision?
So I envision our first clinic being replicated in major hospitals across the United States. It's a medical legal partnership with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so our hope is that our local hospital, the same organization that was actively sabotaging our start is now funding us. And so based on the numbers of close to 80% of moms that we work with don't have any type of filing or removal. And so the hope is that that spreads, and it's not just a cross-disciplinary model, but a multidisciplinary model where medical students, law students, doctors, and lawyers are all working in one collaborative clinic to change how medicine and law intersect. And then on the domestic violence front, to Russia's point, I think going in and educating students as early as possible, even in middle school, in grade school, about the dangers of domestic violence and what to look for and what healthy relationships are, and just changing the conversation, making everyone aware that it can impact them.
Yeah. Thank you. Carolina, what about you? 5 years from now, what do you envision for your organization?
And, similar to what Adam just described, I think we would like, our board and the entire organization would like to see Madouche replicas in different parts of the world, right? So if we have, God forbid, a disaster similar to what happened in Beirut in the Middle East, we can just respond right away instead of going through weeks and many times even months to get the aid where it needs to go. When you have a disaster in Honduras or Nicaragua, you can just respond and you can just use these centers as distribution centers. So ideally that should happen and hopefully will happen. I'm not sure if 5 years is the right number, but that's where we're heading, hopefully.
Sure. What about you, Zena? 5 years from now, what do you envision with your organization and Lebanon itself, actually, if you don't mind?
Actually, I just did this exercise recently about looking back at 5 years ago, 2015. And if I were in 2015, would I have imagined being here in 2020 with so many different programs and a staff of more than 30 people and working with thousands of youth? It's remarkable what can happen in 5 years. And it's incredible how different Nawaya is today than 5 years ago. It looks nothing like it was in 2015. And so if I look at 2025, I would hope that it doesn't look anything like it is today, but in a good way, that because I feel like over the past 5 years, we've been so responsive to the needs of the community. We've adapted, we've made sure that we're not stuck in a certain way of doing things just because we think it makes sense. If we try hard to do something, it's not working, we need to find a different way. And that's actually what I tried to do from 2012 to 2015. I had this brilliant idea. And for 3 years, I traveled around the world to different conferences, you know, pitching my idea, really thinking that this is it, knocking on CEO doors in Lebanon, thinking like, this is so brilliant. And I just wasn't getting anywhere. And so I had to change. I stuck with my mission, but I changed my way of getting there. And that's how so many doors opened in terms of the different programs now that we have. And so I just want to stay on that path, that big vision of empowering underprivileged youth, and maybe not just in Lebanon, but around the region, ideally, and even around the world. Now that COVID has proven that our program can be effective, we've taken all our programs online. So, I mean, why not have this entrepreneurship program for people on the other side of the world? And also, I was mentioning the social entrepreneurship side of like the difficulty of generating revenue in an entrepreneurship program focused on underprivileged youth, but there's nothing stopping us from taking this curriculum and offering it to other markets and other communities who can pay to help sustain the social impact side. So there's a lot of creativity and innovation at play, and I just hope we continue to do that and continue to be creative and responsive over the years.
Absolutely. So with the last about 9 minutes we have left, I'd like you to give us a sort of final statement, if you will, each of you, to tell us maybe how we can donate specifically to your organization and any last thoughts you might have for us. So Adam, can you please start us off?
Thank you. Hopefully Sally can post a link to the first clinic. You're able to provide a donation there. I'll just say that regardless of what venture you're going out into, whether that's profit or nonprofit, expect resistance and expect that it'll be there. Don't be disheartened by it. And I think some of the points that were brought up earlier in the talk about writing down your successes and being able to look back at them, that is gonna be the portion of time where you feel like you can save and continue, like almost when you save your progress in a video game, where you don't have to worry about going back from there. And also not to put unrealistic pressure on yourself. It's okay that things don't occur on that artificial timeline that you set in your mind. That's okay. And yeah, I wish everyone the best. If anyone, I view this work as sort of a relay race, and that, you know, we're a team and we pass the baton on to the next person that has more energy and more vision and more inspiration. So as part of these roles in the room, look for who's not in the room and who should be in the room, and you can elevate those voices. And one of the best things about being part of a board is that you can essentially put together a symphony of different thoughts and ideas, people from different racial backgrounds and financial backgrounds and lived experience, and then elevate those voices. And you could be somebody that brings people onto a board that maybe they didn't ever think that they could be a part of. So in whatever organization you go into, try to make it better and more diverse and more open-minded, you know, than as you arrived, if you can. Absolutely. Thank you. Rasha, what about you?
So the best way to donate to our organization is if you go to our website, nadiashopefoundation.com, and you will get a charitable tax receipt if you do. And to anybody who's in Canada and wants some advice on starting a nonprofit, even just the nonprofit, you're more than welcome to send me an email, which will be on the website. It can be quite daunting for sure. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of feeling lost because even though you do have like a supportive board and you do have supportive people, you will at times be alone and do a lot of the work, especially if you are the one that is founding and starting this organization, which is what I did. So just know that there will be times where you are going to be alone, and that's okay, but you have to just always remember, even though like Adam was saying, you have accomplishments and you have this like XYZ that you want to do, sometimes you have to think back as to what is the core reason you started this organization, and always go back to that. What is your mission? Why did you start this? Your accomplishments are not because of funding that you're getting. Your accomplishments are not because you had this certain person vouch for you or the other. It's all about what you want to make it and how you are accomplishing that. So set some realistic goals for sure. And realistic goals within like a year, but also 5-10 years, but enough that like some goals that you for sure want to accomplish and some that you would love to, so that if you accomplish those small goals, you can look back and think, I did good. So just remember always to go back to that core reason why you started this organization. And mine was to just start something that's going to help even one person. And if I'm able to do that, then I feel like I've kind of done my mission and finished it. So if anybody needs help, please feel free to shoot me an email. I would love to give some advice. And I think that's also what's important. I really love the fact that this was created. So thank you, Sally, and everybody, and Malek for being the moderator. That I think it's, we don't know where to start when it comes to starting an NGO. And it's a lot of research, but some people don't have the time or energy to do that. So even just starting something like this, I think is really important. But just know that you don't have to have certain experience or a certain age for you to ever start something like this. As long as you have something that you're passionate about, you can do anything, honestly.
Absolutely. Thank you. Carolina, please go ahead.
Something that came to mind when, and this is totally off topic, I'll jump back to this one, when Zaina was talking about her different programs, and I failed to mention when we differentiated nonprofits from charities, is that nonprofits not necessarily work for charitable purposes. They do have handling fees. They have many times fee for service. So that's something to keep in mind. And I wanted to clarify that because I did not mention it, but when she said it, I immediately thought of it. I believe that it's, if you are thinking not only about starting your own nonprofit, but maybe joining the nonprofit world, what I can tell you is that every day is different. And this industry really provides you with a lifetime of exciting work. And let me tell you that nonprofits honestly are full of very, very passionate and smart people. I always tell the individuals that I interview that in this world, you have to have a special skin, right? It is hard to explain, but truly it takes a special and passionate individual to get the work done. And that's why we have so many volunteers. And that's how many times we hire these volunteers when we see their passion. My piece of advice is that you got to surround yourself by very smart people. I mean, these are the individuals that you learn from. And in this industry, like many others, you learn every day. And I'm not kidding, you do learn every day. As far as supporting MedWish, I mean, thank you to you guys for even offering that opportunity. People can visit medwish.org. They can learn more about the work we do, not only here in the US, but internationally. If you ever want to join a medical brigade and come with us to one of these international trips, please reach out. It's a life-changing experience. And once again, thank you guys for putting this together. This has been great.
Thank you, Carolina. Zaina, any parting thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, for any, I reflected on how I started Nawaya, and in 2011, before it launched, I did 3 key things for anyone interested in starting a nonprofit. Number one, really building skills. So I took online courses from NYU while I was here on organizational management. I took a course at NYU while I was working there on marketing. I took accounting course. I took an HR workshop here. I took a 6-month business development course with Amethyst. Just build skills as much as possible, because as a founder, you will need to do a whole bunch of different things at the beginning. You don't have the funds to hire a staff. So get into the nitty-gritty aspects of organizational development. So that's number one, build skill set. Number two, do a lot of research about how your initiative or organization is going to be extremely different than others. it's got to be a little different for people to, you know, feel excited about, oh, well, this isn't just a replication of something that already exists, but it's got a little different, you know, a target or a twist. It's like a business, how you would research your competition, research, because there are so many NGOs out there, maybe with similar causes, just find a way to differentiate so that you know how to pitch what you're doing effectively. And number 3, networking. So really going out and talking to people, learning from them, sharing your idea. Don't feel like you have to protect it. Just share what you have in mind. Take the feedback, take the negatives, take the positives, do something with them. That's only going to help you move forward and build something better. So attend conferences, go to workshops, just get out of bed and be present, go to gatherings, and see where that leads you. So those are my parting words. Educate, build your skills, research, and network. And anyone who'd like to support, thank you in advance. There's a tax-deductible donation link on our website at nawaya.org. And thank you.
Thank you. Well, let me say how humbled I am to be a fellow Muwahid with all of you, how proud I am of your amazing work. You know, it's so inspiring to see you making real change in the world. And I just wish you all much success, because what you're doing is literally going to change our future. This is not hyperbole, this is reality. So thank you all. Thank you for Network 1017 for arranging this wonderful panel. I've just had I've learned so much, and I've just had the great time of spending these few minutes with all of you. And I hope that we can do this again in the future. Come visit us in Oregon sometime. All right. Thank you all, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.